Is Europe's future on the ballot in Hungary? In Budapest, the U.S. vice president actively stumping for far-right incumbent Viktor Orban, who trails in the polls ahead of Sunday's general election there. European politicians, well, they sometimes campaign for like-minded peers from neighboring nations and make a trip or two. But here, it's the United States openly taking aim at the bloc, using the same talking points as Vladimir Putin's Russia. We'll hear clips. We'll also ask whether Vance's support helps or hurts Orban in the home stretch of a race where the 62-year-old populist made a point of holding up the EU's €90 billion lifeline loan to Ukraine. We'll ask about Orban's strategy and the opposition's claim that the prime minister tried a false flag operation in neighbouring Serbia with an alleged plot against a pipeline supplying Russian gas. More broadly, we'll be assessing how a nation of 9.5 million has fared under 16 years of increasingly illiberal Orban rule. How has pushing Hungary as the avant-garde of a white Christian, anti-woke, anti-immigrant alliance served Hungary? And what's the opposition offering instead? Today in the France 24 debate, we're talking about Hungary's Orban and his tight re-election bid. With us from Berlin, Hungarian-born political analyst Shoshana Veg of the German Marshall Fund think tank. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you for having me.
She's a Hungarian in Paris, Edith Arani Toth, campaigner for the opposition. Do you say Tisza or Tisza?
Tisza.
Tisza movement. Thank you for being with us.
Thanks for inviting.
His latest book, just out in French, The Woke Right. Thibaut Muzel, political director of the think tank Shared Ground. Good to see you in the studio. You're usually in Rome.
Yeah, this time here. Thank you for having me.
We reached out, by the way, to Viktor Orban's Fidesz party offices in both Budapest and Brussels. Unsuccessfully. They're always welcome to join the conversation, as you are too. By the way, you can always listen. That's right, listen to the France 24 debate wherever podcasts are streamed. It's, quote, one of the worst examples of foreign election interference I've seen or even read about. That quote is from the Vice President of the United States in Budapest. This 5 days before a make-or-break general election, and it's aimed squarely at the European Union. Eliza Herbert has more.
At the 11th hour, the US Vice President is in Hungary to show support for his close European ally. The Hungarian Prime Minister is trailing in most of the polls ahead of Sunday's pivotal national election. JD Vance wants Hungarians to know Viktor Orban is his choice.
I'm here because of the moral cooperation between our two countries, because what the United States and Hungary together represent under Viktor's leadership and under President Trump's leadership is the defense of Western civilization.
During Donald Trump's second term, his administration has openly aligned itself with so-called patriotic European parties, often far-right movements like Orban's that are anti-woke, anti-immigration, and have at times shown contempt for Brussels. And Vance isn't changing tack.
But I did want to send a signal to everybody, particularly the bureaucrats in Brussels who have done everything that they can to hold down the people of Hungary because they don't like the leader.
Ahead of the elections, Trump also issued an unequivocal endorsement to Orban in March.
So I hope he wins, and I hope he wins big.
But while the outcome remains uncertain, a landslide seems unlikely. Some independent polls show a double-digit deficit for Orban, behind pro-European conservative challenger Tisza Magyar. He too had a message for Hungarians.
No foreign country may interfere in Hungarian elections. This is our country. Hungarian history is not written in Washington, Moscow, or Brussels. It is written in Hungary's streets and squares.
Some analysts have also suggested that Moscow might be secretly interfering to assist Orban's re-election, in hope of keeping the Russia-friendly leader in power.
All right, so you heard there, Shoshana Veg, JD Vance taking aim at Brussels bureaucrats, the unelected ones. He doesn't say unelected, but that's I guess what he means, who are trying to meddle. Your thoughts on how his message today compares with that message he gave a year ago in February in Munich, to European leaders, saying that the greatest threat facing Europe was from within.
It very much rhymes to the message from the Munich Security Conference. And in fact, he again brought up the issue of the European Union curtailing free speech in the EU. That was actually even his addition to all the criticism that Prime Minister Viktor Orban also addressed to the European Union. So the message is the same. It is a message that is very welcome by the Hungarian government, and quite honestly, from the Trump administration, I think Vice President Vance is the perfect member to really come and support Viktor Orban's campaign in these last moments, because he's the one who can most credibly present the shared ideology from the American side. But at the same time, he has much less of a name recognition than President Trump. And I do not really think that his presence in Hungary now really makes much of a difference to the campaign at this very last stage.
You agree with that, Editor Toth? Is this more about U.S. domestic politics? Because we also saw the Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who attended this year's Munich Security Conference, then go to Budapest. Are they coming to Budapest to support Viktor Orban or to score points at home?
In fact, both, I think. Score points at home because I really consider Viktor Orban like a sort of a proof of concept of this illiberal democracy that is being copied somehow by Trump. So that's I think that's the reason to show this sort of inspiration, and this is a successful leader in this respect. And home, a very important message for their close support, for their close fans to Orban at home, that consider this as a huge international political success, and they think that's what Viktor Orban wants to show. He is a main player on the international field.
Yeah, and those images, by the way, we're seeing on our screen right now. It was during a rally just a short while ago. J.D. Vance putting the president on speakerphone. You heard Shoshana saying that that Trump has more name recognition. Again, we're not sure if this is going to work one way or the other. We heard that clip, Thibault Museau, of the U.S. vice president saying it's not Europe that's on the ballot, it's Western civilization. We talk about Viktor Orban as anti-woke. Is this anti-woke or woke of a different nature?
Well, I think originally it's anti-woke, but then it became very quickly a sort of right-wing wokeism. I mean, it's really
what does
interesting.
That mean, right-wing woke?
Basically, I mean, the woke right is basically a part of the conservative movement that has fighting the woke, and I think they did fight it. They did fight the woke movement with their hearts, but doing that, you know, the phrase by Nietzsche, "Look long enough in the abyss, and the abyss looks back at you." They ended up basically adopting the same strategies and the same kind of philosophy as them. So they're just as identitarian, obsessed with identity, victimist. And I think you see it with Viktor Orban these days. I mean, he needs to have an enemy, and it's Brussels. It used to be Brussels. It's less Brussels now. It's Volodymyr Zelensky. It's a bit of a downgrade, actually. Volodymyr Zelensky is basically the evil that is trying to do bad stuff to him, bad stuff to the Hungarians through him, and at the end of the day, just as intolerant as the woke movement. I mean, it was interesting to see in the CPAC 2 years ago that was organized in Budapest.
CPAC, which is this conservative
political action conference.
Yeah, they have a big conference.
Yeah, and they have one in Budapest, which they do every year, and this is, you know, a great event, good for them. But it had been made a woke-free zone. So a no woke zone, which is interesting because this is exactly the same culture of cancellation that you see on the woke left. And it is unfortunate that that Viktor Orban, who, truly, if you look at, he's a survivor. He has been extremely successful in history, whether you like him or not. It's a bit of a shame to see him go down that path today.
Yeah, he started on the center left, Shoujana Vague, and now is on the far right. And what is it about this, the fact that he's carved out this niche here in the heart of Europe?
I wouldn't put early Orban on the center left. I think he started out more as a liberal, anti-communist, not a left-wing politician. But his transformation, and with him the party's Fidesz's transformation, was actually a very long process. The party, noticing, I guess, in the 1990s that it will not reach a big success with a liberal ideology in Hungary, simply because that's not where voters are, it gradually started to shift to the right. It became a conservative nationalist party. It co-opted and essentially subjugated other smaller right-wing parties, incorporated their electorate and their programs, and shifted gradually to the right. And by the 2010s, it was clearly positioned in the center right. But due to the electoral competition and the rising far-right challenger in Hungary at the time, Jobbik, Orban started to further pick up some of the tropes of the far-right party. This was also the time when his governance increasingly started to show authoritarian tendencies. So while ideologically
in all of this,
to the far right, he also...
in all of this, Shoujana, Hungarians followed him. Why?
I think his core base indeed moved, and I think as far as we were talking about a center-right party, it was more like he really found a wider base, and his program resonated with Hungarian voters. But from the 2010s, he also started to build up a massive media empire. He subjugated the public media under party control, and from then on, you actually see massive propaganda in Hungary as well that shapes voters' perceptions. And through that process, which is part of Orban's autocratization process, he also started to shape his voters' attitudes increasingly so. So from then on, yes, indeed, the core base is following him, in part due to the massive propaganda that it has been subjected to, both through public and private media channels.
Right, and as Thibaut Muzelg was saying, his number one target has traditionally been bashing Brussels, and more it's shifted towards Ukraine in the home stretch of this campaign. On Monday, the Hungarian Prime Minister rushing to the border after Serbian intelligence arrested what it called a foreigner with military training and found 2 backpacks containing about 4 kilos of explosives near the Turk Stream pipeline that supplies Russian gas to Hungary. Serbian intelligence dismissing that Ukrainian involvement was at stake here. But that didn't stop the Hungarian PM from insinuating otherwise as he spoke on Monday.
I would not further damage Ukrainian-Hungarian relations by accusing any country, say Ukraine, without knowing the facts. So I would not do this until we have the facts. I will not do this. However, it is undoubtedly true that what we are experiencing here now fits into a series of events, since the Ukrainians have such an ability and are willing and able to do something like this.
Edita and Arito, should be noted, there are Hungarian minorities across several borders, including Ukraine. Is this election ploy to try to get those people who are of a Hungarian, who are Hungarians but not living inside of Ukraine, to vote for his party?
Yeah, indeed, it was a very famous trick as well of Viktor Orban. One of his tricks at some point in his period of 16 years, he granted Hungarian citizenships to all having Hungarian sources or ancestors in their families. And these populations have voting rights for Hungary, not full voting rights. We can enter into the details, but they have voting rights.
So that means places like Romania, Ukraine,
yeah,
Bosnia.
Exactly. We are speaking here about 400-500 votes that count into the
405,000.
500,000 votes counting into the election. Yes, and these people follow Orban's politic because there are massive subventions granted to them. Also, very visible funds like going to sports stadiums. We all know about Orban's love for sport. So he invests in those types of things abroad, across the Hungarian border, into Hungarian areas. And buys people votes with this, and that can play, as said, 400,000 votes.
So are you suggesting then the polls could be wrong, that the polls don't properly count those Hungarians that are outside of Hungary?
Polls count properly, but the polls state that this is accounting only inside the Hungarian borders. So everything which is outside is not taken into account here. So when we see the 2 digits difference, this doesn't take into account this difference indeed. And then we could go even further, because we expect some hardcore cheating in the last minute. There is a film just came out lately, which says about all those practices that target really very poor people, and that can be bought by some very little amount of money, or even threatening them by taking their children away because living in very precarious situations. So it's really primary cheating that might happen in the last minutes, and some experts value this to between 10 and 15 points of percentage points in the votes.
Thibaut Muserg, your thoughts on again what it means to be a Hungarian in 2026, and how again this can make it the polls say one thing, but the outcome might be another.
Yeah, I think the outcome is very indecisive, as you said. It's a tough race. I think it's really the first time where you see Fidesz and Orban Viktor on under pressure, and not necessarily reacting very positively to it. But yeah, there is it's going to be. I think it's going to be a much tighter race than we think. Those who write Viktor Orban and Fidesz off do not know how professional the machine, the electoral machine is. I think it's the most professional political organization that we have in Europe, taking away all of the considerations, ideological, et cetera, and obviously the allegations of fraud and use of administrative powers to gain votes that we heard. And yeah, it's going to be a tough fight. One thing that I think is very interesting, though, is that whether we like it or not, Viktor Orban redefined what it means to be Hungarian today. And I think it is very telling that the only time that he's under pressure, it's under the pressure of someone who used to belong to his party, that was part of the Fidesz ecosystem until very recently, and that shares a lot of the ideas and values that Viktor Orban has been promoting for the past 16 years now.
So what are you suggesting, that Péter Magyar, the head of this opposition coalition, how much does he resemble Viktor Orban?
Well, we'll know that after the elections if he wins. But he is from the same matrix. He grew up inside Fidesz. Now that can also mean that he is going to break. I think that's what he's been campaigning on, a clean break from the Orban years. It's been 16 years. That's a lot of time under one government, 16 years of quasi absolute power. Because the thing that we don't say is that when he gets elected in 2010, Viktor Orban wins with not only with an absolute majority, but with a constitutional majority. And that, I think, that unleashes absolutely everything. You know, the saying that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. We have 16 years of a government that has had absolutely no checks and balances. Hungary is a very centralized country. Everything is centered in Budapest and is centered around the parliament, around the government. You get control. You get a constitutional majority. You can do pretty much whatever you want with the country. And I think if you look at where Hungary was back then in 2010 and where it is now, I wouldn't say there's been much progress. I think Viktor Orban has managed to transform a Central European country into a Western Balkan country in terms of the economy, which is, I don't think that's to be taken.
I want to get into the demographics and the economy in a moment, but I first want to get Eddie to rebound on this. Peter Magyar, his appeal is that he is different, but not too different from Viktor Orban. He's a conservative. He's not from the left. That's for certain.
Exactly, and he even for this reason, he goes very smoothly on some topics like gender propaganda, defending the Budapest Pride movement, or even in the Ukrainian.
What do you mean by going smoothly?
He doesn't
speak about it.
He doesn't stand up saying, "Okay, I'm for it and I'm fighting for the right of the LGBT community." He knows very well what are the messages that work with the Hungarian today, and it might be considered as sad, but really these messages are really entered into the brains of the Hungarian, and he has to go smoothly with it and then change smoothly. But there are some very very clear messages that distinguish him from Orban's direction, which is the turning towards Europe and not towards the East, or the very thing which we mentioned, that constitutional laws would change in the sense that his first promise is to limit to 2 mandates, the mandate of the prime minister in Hungary once he's getting elected. So that's a sort of a limitation to that power that Orban could accumulate.
So, Zsuzsanna, for those who follow Hungarian politics from afar, there's kind of this idea that, well, Peter Magyar, he's kind of like the Hungarian Donald Tusk, from the center-right in Poland, as opposed to the more hard-line Law and Justice Party. Judging by what the panel here in the studio is saying, some people might be in for a surprise if ever Viktor Orban's out of office.
Yes, I think Donald Tusk is more on the center, maybe a little bit more progressive end of the European People's Party, ideologically speaking. He is definitely more liberal when it comes to values of plurality and inclusion. Peter Magyar is more conservative. He is closer to Orban, for example, on issues like migration. But I think there are some fundamental differences that we need to keep in mind. Yes, he is a conservative, nationalist politician, and for him also a reference point when dealing with the EU will be national sovereignty and the nation state. But he did very explicitly committed Hungary's future to the European Union, which after 16 years of Orban and a rising Euroscepticism in the government's rhetoric I think is a very important stance to take. He approaches the European Union more as a platform through which Hungary can actually exercise its sovereignty and can benefit from. So he wants to use the EU as a platform rather than abuse it. But he will not be an easy partner for the European Union. He is not a Euro federalist. He is not a Euro enthusiast. He is critical of the EU, but he wants to, from what we can gather from the campaign and the communication, he wants to use the framework to the advantage of the country, and he sees the future of Hungary in Europe.
Yeah, and so we talked about at the outset, the backing of the incumbent from the United States, and there's also the accusations of collusion with Moscow. The press has been picking up on allegations of, we talked about it last month, real-time communications during EU summits, and in particular, an August 2024 phone call between Hungary's foreign minister, Péter Szijjártó, and Russia's foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov, according to Polish investigative site V-Square. Lavrov pushed back in 2024 to have the sister of Russian Uzbek oligarch Alisher Usmanov taken off an EU sanctions list. Gulbahor Ismailova, and it turns out that according to that site, the transcript read, look, I'm calling on the request of Alisher. He just asked me to remind you that you were doing something about his sister. Yeah, absolutely, was the reply from Szijjártó. And lo and behold, 1 year later, she was taken off a sanctions list. This at the request, by the way, of Hungary and Slovakia. How does that go down in Hungary? People don't care, or they do?
They do care about Hungary being a sort of, sorry to say, use wrong or strong words, but a spy of the.
I mean, this was a country that was invaded by Soviet tanks in 1956. Exactly. What do you think about these close ties with Moscow?
In fact, we often speak about Orban's current orientation towards Russia, but we know it. We remember it that in '89.
Do Hungarians remember it?
They must remember it. I remember it. So he was the one saying, "Soviet, go home," and that's something that is so deeply in his history and in his curriculum of Orban. And then progressively he moved towards Russia for political advantage, for economical advantage, and he became really progressively during the years explicitly a spy of Moscow within the European Union. He's a very useful person for Putin in the European Union. He is really the one helping him the most.
Thibault Muzelk, is there amnesia when it comes to the past, or
no? I don't think there's amnesia, and I'm sorry, I'm going to be the advocate of Viktor Orban here. I'm going to play the advocate of Viktor Orban. I think there are two things. There's one, there is the memory of 1956 in part of the conservative right that is supporting Viktor Orban. There is a different conclusion that has been taken from the events of 1956 in Budapest, which is do not cause trouble with the Russians because otherwise you're going to get invaded. And this sort of pacifism is something that you see in the intellectual circle around Viktor Orban, a discourse at least. Balázs Orban, for example, has used that. So there is one thing. And then there's another thing which I think is very interesting, also because it's linked to France. If you look at the change in the discourse of Viktor Orban, it happens roughly at the same time. It starts changing his discourse about Russia. He was one of the greatest advocates of Georgian independence at the time of the war when Putin invaded Georgia. And then immediately after, so we're in 2009, there is a state visit. I can't remember if it's Putin who goes to Budapest or Orban who goes to Moscow. It's roughly the same time, and I think even the same month in which there is this famous entrevue between Sarkozy and Vladimir Putin. And both of them, who were considered very anti-Russian at the time, they completely flip-flop. And then there's a whole ecosystem.
How do you explain that? What
Well,
happened?
you would have to ask both Mr. Sarkozy and Mr. Orban, because something obviously happened behind the scenes. We don't really know what. I think both of them, both Orban and Sarkozy, have been absolutely blown away by the impression of power that Putin was giving at that time. We remember when in 2008, Russia becomes extremely rich very quickly because the oil prices are very high, and there is the idea of a Russian power coming back. And I think for both Orban and for Sarkozy, this view, this idea of the strong man who is in control of everything, they were extremely impressed by that. And I think it played. There are other things that played as well, maybe less intellectual, let's say, that were at play. But I think this impression that Putin gave them at the same time has, it really turned the table. And from then on, the view that both men have towards Russia is completely turns on its head.
Yeah, these are archive images we were just showing from 2014. Of course, Zsuzsanna Vég, fast forward to 2026. And Viktor Orban is aligned both with Moscow and Washington. Why is this?
Well, or so he thinks. He is definitely aligned with Moscow, especially when it comes to the country's position on Ukraine. Very often, what we have seen over the past years, what Edith also mentioned, and you also showed in the clips, that Hungarian officials have been doing favors for Russia. On the United States, I think it's actually more complicated. When it comes to the United States geopolitical interest in Central Europe, I do think that actually the Trump administration has certain problems with Viktor Orban's close alliance with Russia, and especially Hungary's dependence on Russian energy sources. There have been signs that the American administration is actually trying to push the Hungarian government to diversify and move away from Russian sources. And when it comes to alignment with the Trump administration, definitely in ideological terms, we do see that. We have heard that today from Vice President Vance. On migration, on many culture war issues, there is the alignment. But it is very hard to be aligned with the Trump administration generally in foreign policy terms when the Trump administration is, well, quite chaotic in its action and explanations for its
Zsuzsanna,
actions.
The Trump administration is chaotic. How about Hungary's ruling party, its relations with those other parties that it sits with in the European Parliament that include Geert Wilders' party in the Netherlands, the party in Italy that's to the far right, in France, Marine Le Pen's National Rally, and the AfD in Germany, where you are. Is that a more stable core, if you will?
I would say no. There are certain topics on which these parties are also aligned, but given that at the core their ideology is rooted in nationalism, nativism, they are very much influenced by their internal politics and how they relate to the external world. All of them are Eurosceptic, all of them are anti-migration, but there is little that really helps them to come up with a united policy platform. At the same time, I think they are trying to put aside the differences because they see that actually there is power in cooperation, and that power may be disruptive, but it is influence. And by cooperating, they amplify their voices, they portray themselves as much more influential, much more relevant on the European stage. And also they by performing well in the European elections, get much more access to financial resources. So cooperation pays off, even if it is not pulling always in the same direction.
Yeah, what do you make of this alliance that sits now in the European Parliament? Matteo Salvini of Liga. That's who I drew a blank back there. He saw him in those images. That was a sort of that was that CPAC rally weekend. There was also all these leaders of the European far right who met again in Budapest.
So what I can see in that is in fact, I agree with what Zsuzsanna said earlier, that it's just a tool, a mean for Viktor Orban to gain a popularity. For him, the only reason for him to act is really to accumulate power, economic, political, judiciary, whatever. For him the only he has no ideology. Sorry to say, he is really his only ideology is himself and keeping his power, and that's a very popular wing in Hungary. So he connects himself to this direction, but for him it's a purely a popularity tool.
So, Edith, earlier you talked about how things have gone the last 6 years. We heard Thibault Muzelk say not so great. I have a question. Hungary's population stands at 9.5 million, but it's declining, like in a lot of other European countries. It's been steadily declining since the early 1980s. Why is that?
It's really a contradiction, because that's one of Fidesz's main story, that we support families. We have one of the best family support system and so on, and this is not really true. The economy is declining, so people have no confidence. They also, a big part of the population, bigger than any time earlier, leave the country. So that's also a big problem.
But the country sold itself as this place that there's less red tape, so you can have like the automotive industry come here, and it's a better place to invest in industry. That was the narrative a few years back.
Yeah, it's still the narrative. Does it pay out? Not really, because in your everyday life, you cannot really see the benefits as a family in Hungary.
Thibault Muzelk.
No, it's really remarkable, as you mentioned, as you both mentioned, the whole discourse about Hungary being a kids-friendly country. I think it was a couple of years ago. It was the slogan when Hungary is kids. It's kids-friendly and protects kids against LGBTQI+, etc. Propaganda. And in the end, the results are only marginally better than in the neighboring countries. If you talk about demography, while the economic results, which were good, I mean, let's be honest, they were relatively good compared to the others in the mid-2010s, because Orban arrived after the disaster that was the Gyurcsány government just before the 2008 crisis. He does a few things that are very popular and that put the economy back on track a bit quicker than the others. But since then, the economy has been going down. There is one thing that, when we were talking about the relationship with the United States, one of the things that Orban has done, I think this is something that stems from his discourse in Ballot in 2014 about illiberalism and the move to the East, is he bets clearly on China. For him, China, the West is over, the East is the future, and he bets a lot on China. If you look at the strategy, which is very interesting, of Hungary in the automotive industry, is to go full on the Chinese, to be the hub for the Chinese automotive industry, with the hope that the cars will be made in Hungary, and that will make the Hungarian nation richer, which is very interesting, because originally Orban had a deal with the German automotive industry, but then he switched to the Chinese automotive industry. I think this is going to be interesting to see, because if Peter Magyar is elected this Sunday, this is one of the things that he will not be able to change. because now it's too late. It's too late. We're too much down the road, and it might bring some benefit to Hungary. We'll see. I'm personally skeptical, but while the Czechs have Škoda and Volkswagen, the Slovaks have other companies, which I can't remember right now, which is terrible because I lived 10 years in this country and now I can't remember which. PSA, Stellantis has a big factory there in Slovakia. In Hungary now it's full on BYD, sorry. And the other Chinese battery and car manufacturers that are there.
And Geneviève, when you look at the direction in which Hungary is going and that population drain, how do you explain it?
There are multiple factors here. Edith mentioned that there are more people leaving the country than before, and of course the freedom of movement within the European Union definitely allows for that. I think there is increasing number of young people who try to go already study abroad, partly because they perceive the Hungarian education system as not competitive enough, that will not guarantee them a livelihood later on. Viktor Orban has adopted a policy very strangely that actually is trying to encourage young people, students to learn a trade rather than pursue higher education. This is actually to generate workforce for those industries, for the factories that we have been talking about, but this is not really adding value, innovative value from the Hungarian end, which ultimately is not attractive for people. And the other part, I believe, is that the family policies have not been as successful as the government would have liked to see. The birth rate actually has been dropping in recent years rather than increasing, even though the government introduced a variety of incentives, tax exemption for women with 3-4 children, preferential loans for young families. And this is just simply not an incentive enough, apparently, to have children. So there are various trends contributing to what we ultimately see, that the population is shrinking. People who leave the country very often do not return anymore. They make their life elsewhere in the European Union. And those are the most productive parts of society who are not going to contribute.
So you were mentioning earlier, Edith, about how when you look at the Hungarians abroad and how they vote, you have the incumbent appealing to a nationalist fiber to those in surrounding states, but all those young people that are leaving, and the government's tried. They scrapped an income tax for under 25s, help for buying a new house. Those young people, are they going to vote for Viktor Orban come Sunday?
That's also
the ones
a good
that are
question.
abroad?
No, there is really two categories of Hungarian abroad. There is the minorities around the country, which we were speaking about, but there is this other population leaving the country and seeking for the job in Western Europe or in the States and so on. And statistics from the last elections, 22, show that while the scores for Orban in the home country, the score abroad was like 15% of the votes. So all these people leaving the country and going abroad west, they vote against
They
Fidesz.
vote both with their feet and against Fidesz when it comes to...
And that's why, by the way, to mention here is that that's why it's extremely difficult to vote from abroad, from west in these countries. Because
you have to go to the consulate.
You have to go to the consulate. Three consulates in France, for example, just an example. While Romanian can vote in 76 places, if my memory is correct, in France. So 3 against 76. It's really not the same score. And even if in France we could say Romanian are more present than Hungarian, these ratios are extremely far away. We could say 30 times easier to vote for a Romanian than for a Hungarian.
All right, and you'll be voting Sunday, and we'll be covering it, of course, Sunday night, the results of this make or break general election, not just for Hungary, but perhaps to a lesser degree for the entire continent. Edith Arani-Toth, I want to thank you so much. I want to thank Zsuzsanna Vega for being with us from Berlin. Thibaut Muzelk, thank you for being with us here in person in the studio. Thank you for joining us here in the France 24 debate.